Local farmers years ago, 50 years ago if I remember, they would call these gumbo soils because it would be so sticky when they were wet. And they also talked about sody slicks. And we're probably already here in an area of sody slicks. The soil is a little bit more gray, especially when it dries, and it's relatively bare. And then you find little rocks right here, and I actually have a handful I have picked out. I'm going to find me a little spot here where there are a lot of these, and there are several spots like that. But these rocks right here are concretions, mineral concretions that have participated out on alkaline soils. So we have pH soils here, according to Dave, that are in pH of 7 to 8, very high. And these high sodium soils, sody slicks as they were called, even in scientific terms, gumbo soils, I think they don't use it so much anymore. I really don't know. But anyway, these are high alkaline soils. At one time, there was a flora associated with them where there were larger alkaline soils that had probably a flora that was a bit different than what we see today. These are just small such areas, but they're nevertheless representative of these soils. And I said, Dave, how come that we have these spots? Well, he says you got to go back 10 to 20,000 years. This was all permafrost during the last ice age, Wisconsin ice age. This was all permafrost, and these alkaline sody slicks, these pockets, were formed during permafrost. I thought that was pretty neat. So, you know, we think of soil, well, we treat it often like dirt. I had to get that in. Treat soil like dirt. Well, anyway, like my wife says, don't try to be funny, you're not Bob Hope. Anyway, soils are important. They're important certainly to agriculture, and during those many decades of farming around here, even though this was not farmed, at least not most of this, that's why the prairie survived. Wet prairie survived. And by the way, we walked past it. There are actually patches of irises over there, typical wetland plant. We have hibiscus down there. That's for later on to see some of those unburned grass clumps out there, especially wet, and that's where we have hibiscus. And we got calamus, fragrant, grassy-looking plants that have quite a bit of medicinal value. So this is very interesting. Even here we see where the voles have been active. And then we have these vole runs that were much easier to see earlier, because you have to remember there was dead vegetation here till a few weeks ago, till the IDNR crew, the Department of Natural Resources, burned it off for us, and we're glad to get this done. Recycling the nutrients is important. If it could be done in the fall, would be better, possibly, because what it would do, it would eliminate the high population of rodents, of voles, that eat a lot of good stuff too, if there are too many of them. Also, if you burn off in the fall, you make it easier for migrating raptors to catch a meal on their way south. And that's hard for them to do when you got 4 to 6 foot grass vegetation out here. So there's a big story behind all of this. And then the other thing is, this vegetation, as it recycles its roots, it puts a lot of carbon down. The highway out here, I-55 out there, emits a lot of CO2. Here we have a 10-acre prairie that stores somewhere around 5 tons of carbon annually, stores it. Adds it to the organic matter that, you know, had been depleted, of course, previously, and is largely gone from our farm fields, so we need the high nutrient inputs today. Well, 5 tons per acre, that's 50 tons of carbon that's being stored in this little tiny 10-acre fragment of prairie. That's got to be meaningful, and if that could be scaled up, I think that would be a good thing. So carbon storage is a big thing about the prairie, and you need soils to store the carbon in. And my first sample, of course, out there was a good example of carbon storage because it makes for very, very friable soil. I suppose that this wet soil here is not quite so... It's gummy. It's gumbo soil. It's gummy. It sticks to your fingers. It sticks to your tools. You can probably model something out of it. That's how sticky it is. Well, I was also told by a local farmer that he knows in a woodland of a large remnant sody slick that is also somewhat bare, and the deer like to paw in it and lick the soils. Well, I think that's what the buffalo did originally. They had buffalo wallows where they wallowed in these wet clay licks, and then they also licked the minerals that were here. And that's where these sody slicks came in and benefited the native bison herds. So there is just a ton of interesting history to our soils out here. And hopefully later on we can actually show also what one of these crawdads or crayfish, it goes by several names, looks like. I did find one the other day. This was burnt late, as I mentioned earlier. And I did find one out there on the other side of the drainage. One of the red flags is that probably had gotten nailed by that burn. That was probably a very quick burn. It was fairly windy, and it was generally intact. It was a good specimen of it. I have photos of it, of course, on my cell phone, and we could maybe retrieve that sometime. And otherwise, maybe we just ought to call it a day for this segment. What do you think, Ray?
Thank you, Henry.